Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us on this survey and spatial webinar today, which is the Resiliency and Wellness program, and this is module 2. You would have seen I sent you a copy of the workbook along with the link for today's webinar, just in case some of you missed out on last week's webinar. You'll have that workbook there that was attached to the email. As in previous webinars, if you do have any questions at all, please pop them into the box inside Slido, and Terry will answer those either throughout the webinar or at the end of the session. Our presenter today is Terry McCoy. Terry is an internationally recognised leadership and change expert and one of the most highly acclaimed leadership facilitators globally. He has led leadership forums and retreats all over the world and is recognised for his understanding of leadership in challenging times. He has also successfully led over 15 major organisational change initiatives and has done this through a focus on people and outcomes. As a result of this experience, Terry has distilled his leadership and change expertise into the highly acclaimed Leadership Essentials program. Terry founded the Future Path International over 30 years ago, and today they are the leading providers of leadership development, coaching and change management within New Zealand and APAC. The Future Path National Coaching Centre is the largest in New Zealand, with over 15 coaches who work both nationally and globally. Future Path's promise is simply the best and nothing less. Terry has also been internationally recognised on a number of occasions and was awarded the CPI International Leadership Excellence Award for his contribution to change and transformation internationally. And I'd now like to hand you over to our presenter today, Terry McCoy.
Thanks very much, Jenny. And as I said in the first seminar, I just feel like I'm blushing with all that sort of feedback. What we're going to cover today is one of the questions or queries that you'd like to ask. Don't hesitate to put them up in the chat. Very happy to answer them. And there may be some that came out of the last seminar that you think, I just really need to sort of amplify that or chat about it. And remember, curiosity is invaluable. That's how we learn. And it's a funny thing. You know, a lot of research has shown that at about 8 years of age, humans start changing the concept of learning stuff to getting into that concept of failing or succeeding. And I think we need to change it. It's a roundabout learning. And what we want to learn today about is how to be resilient and how to bring wellness into our lives. The workbook you see is Ki Kaha, Stay Strong. So it's how do you stay strong? And it's funny, I was running a seminar this morning and we were talking about how you stay strong. And one of the interesting things that I said is how resilient and how well you are is depending on your environment. It's depending on the people that are around you. It's depending on what you let into your life. And so what we're going to do is talk a little bit about that today and over the succeeding seminars. So the challenge I gave to the group I was working with this morning, my question was, would you wash your face in sulfuric acid? And the answer was, of course, no. And yet sometimes we allow people into our lives who wash our brain with negative, toxic thoughts. And so it's very important that what we do, and we're going to talk about this today especially, is that we make choices. And the choices that we make are going to affect our thinking. So just recapping on what we covered in the first seminar, we talked about the changing world we're in. Like, we're in a world with the greatest change in human history. And guess what? It's accelerating. It's starting to go faster and faster. And we'll see that coming into our everyday lives. It will be changing our lives in ways we probably haven't thought about. Like, I often hear people saying, oh yeah, but AI is going to change our lives. AI will change our lives. But the interesting thing is that one of the most important places where it will be changing our lives is in medicine. And there's a lot of research going on at the moment about how AI can do research in medicine and come up with creative solutions that we haven't thought about. So it will change health. It will change medicine. It will enable us to live longer. And I was talking to a oncologist, that's a cancer doctor, recently at a function, and I said, what are the changes that are happening in oncology? And he said, phenomenal. He said, in 5 years, our treatments will be different simply because we're using AI. So what does all this mean? You know, people can go, oh gosh, I get so overwhelmed with everything. And that's a real possibility unless you build resilience and wellness. Viki kaha, stay strong. So one story that I love particularly about resilience, which I told in the last seminar, and I'll repeat it again briefly, was Dr. Norman Gumesme many years ago, it was in the mid-50s, was doing research into why certain people succeed and why certain people don't necessarily succeed to the same degree. And he was working in a school in Harlem in New York, which was a very low decile school. And there was a little boy who would come along every day and he'd carry a battered lunchbox. And in the lunchbox, he had 2 pieces of bread, 2 pieces, nothing on the bread, just plain bread. And when he talked to the boy, he found out that the little boy, who was about 8, his father had left when he was about 2. He never knew his dad. His mum was an alcoholic, drug addict, and so forth. And she really struggled to take care of him. He had part-time jobs after school to make a bit of pocket money. And out of that pocket money, he bought groceries and stuff for him and his mum. But one of the main things he always bought was a loaf of sliced bread. And every day he'd take 2 slices of bread, put it in his lunchbox and go to school. And when Norman Gumesme said to him, but why do you do that? He said, because I'm the same as everybody else. And that was when Gumesme coined resilience. Resilience is around a choice in how you think about yourself and in how you think about what is happening around you. Now, you will know many people who always look at a glass half full versus people who look at a glass full. And I know people have said to me at times, oh, you're a bit Pollyanna-ish, you know, you're always looking for the positive in things. And that's true. I don't see it as Pollyanna-ish. I see it as being part of my resilience practice. In the first seminar that we had, I mentioned there that ever since I was knee-high to a grasshopper, I've always looked at and said to myself, no matter what the situation is, no matter how bad it is, where does the opportunity sit? Where's the opportunity? And that is really important because by looking at the opportunity, you change, and I love this term, you change your locus of focus. So locus is a point that, you know, that you focus on. Well, where is the focus going? You change your locus of focus from being what could go wrong, which is stressful, to what could go right, which is a potential opportunity. Now, it doesn't mean you're always going to find opportunities, but what you're doing by changing that locus of focus, you are preparing yourself and getting into the habit of looking at what is positive and what is in front of you versus what is not positive and what is not in front of you. So you also had that little assessment on page 10. Did anybody manage to do it? Anybody want to share what they came out of that? It is just a simple little exercise to get you thinking about what is stress and what are stressors. So today we're going to look at managing those stressors, understanding what you can control, reframing. Now, I was meeting with a client this morning and I was talking about this. I said, you know, the big skill sets of the future are going to be reframing and adaptability and curiosity or learning. Those are the big 3. Reframing, adaptability, and curiosity or learning. Because you're asking yourself, well, is what I'm doing working? Because if it's not working, change it. But how often do you see people, and you could be one of them, that you just keep doing the same old, you know, and the same old is going to give you the same old response. It's like Einstein says, you know, the definition of insanity is doing the same old and expecting a different outcome. So we're going to look at that, and we're going to look at the change transition framework. Well, I think it's a really important one in the sense that it helps us put into a picture of what makes good change and how you can both do it personally, but manage it within teams. So let's look at page 11 of your workbook, page 11 of your workbook. We'll call the page numbers out as we go through. The circle of control and influence. And some of you may remember, I don't know, and I can't remember the exact term, something like 80% of what we worry about will never happen, 10% of what we will worry about we have no control over, and the other 10% we can do something about. It's something like that. But it's interesting, isn't it, that a lot of what happens in our lives we have no control over at all. And yet we can wake up in the night thinking about them, worrying about them, and going, yeah, well, gosh, what if that happened? And the reality is to build yourself a practice, a way of thinking. And I can't emphasize this enough, because the more I work with people, the more I run these kinds of workshops and seminars, the more I do coaching, even within our own teams. The main thing that we've got to focus on is building habits. So the conversation we had in the first seminar, and this conversation I've been having a lot recently, goals don't work that well. A lot of people I've met will sit down and tell you at the beginning of a year, I'm going to get fit this year. I'm going to go to the gym 4 times a week. And they end up going 3 times a week and then 2 times a week. But what's in their mind is, I have failed. I haven't gone 4 times a week. And a better way to do it is using micro actions to create habits. And the habits create behaviors, and the behaviors drive goals. So let's imagine you said, my micro action is to move every day in a way that works for me. So the behavior of the habit that you end up with is actually moving every day, being conscious of that. And ultimately you say, it's easier if I go to the gym to do this, or whatever it may be. So it is with resilience and wellness. You can't build a resilience practice, you can't build strong wellness unless you actively work and practice at it. And I think that is really essential. We're going to talk in some of the following seminars about some of the tools you can use to do that. But let's look at some of the theory of why we need those tools. Many of you, when you look down at this circle here on page 11, you'll see that we have a control circle, an influence circle, a no control circle. I've always thought we need to put another circle around the outside of that, but nobody will let me. That outer circle is called the outer control circle. And sometimes you can get into that situation. So it's about building what you can control versus what you have no control over. And it's interesting, when I've actually sat down coaching individuals and said to them, tell me what you are stressed about, and they tell me, and I go, well, of what you've just told me, what can you control? They're surprised by how much they can control. They're surprised by how much they can actually control. And it's really interesting when you get to this point of, then why don't you do something about controlling it? You know what often the answer is? Oh, yeah, but if I did that, it's going to be difficult, challenging, unpleasant, or it could have a domino effect and affect other things. So I had a person recently who was telling me that they have a friend who has a lot of negative talk around things, and they always tell them what they can't do. And I said, then take this friend out of your life. And they went, well, I've known this person for 20 years. So I said, for 20 years, they've been telling you negative stuff. And they went, well, sort of. And I said, so does it affect you? And they go, well, I can put it to one side. But I said, the fact of the matter is, it is affecting you because you have talked about it, you have brought it up. Now you have 2 choices. You can either change that friend and get that friend to be positive, which is probably going to be very difficult, or just say to this friend, look, I'm in a positive mind space. I can't deal with the negativity. So just move them to one side. And I've got a family, Waida whānau member who has been very like that, always telling me what I should be doing, always telling me what I'm thinking. Even when I say, I'm not thinking that, they go, yes, you are, and so forth. And so one of those things that we need to really focus on is choosing who we have around us, choosing who we have in our life. Our facilitators and coaches will tell me anecdotally the major source of stress or things that happen that are outside your control that cause stress are generally from Waida whānau. Second big one is from your workplace. And guess what the third one is? The third one is in here. It's our self-talk. You know, we wake up in the middle of the night and we go, oh my goodness me, this is what could be happening. Find ways to break it. So like with the people that are in your wider whānau who are negative or who talk to you in a way that actually is causing it causes negativity, which ultimately reflects on your resilience and wellness. Try not to have a lot to do with them, or talk to them about it, or actually just not have anything to do with them about it. So you choose what you have in your life. Last year, I had 2 people in my life that I made the decision that I would not have anything more to do with them. And it was for those reasons. They had just gone into they'd just gone down alleyways that were sort of really negative and toxic in many ways. And I just said, no, I can't have anything to do with you anymore. Sounds hard. But the funny thing about it is at the moment they moved out of my life, I came across a couple of people who were the opposite, who came back into my life. So it's a choice thing. All I'm saying is it's a choice in your own way. Make a list of the things that you feel that are causing you stress that you can't control, and then challenge yourself to find ways to control them. So the most effective way to do that, you can see there on page 11, is what is in front of me, or this action, does it add value or take happiness away from me? Does it take away peace? Does it take away joy? And if it takes away happiness, peace, and joy, why do I allow it in my life? It's just not healthy. You know, we talk about wellness, and wellness is just not an intellectual concept. It is something that we feel here. And I have seen people in situations where they have been living with no control, which causes high levels of stress, and they get unwell. It affects wellness. Now, resilience is also your ability to bounce back. As I said in the first seminar, if you love Winnie the Pooh, and I love Winnie the Pooh, in Winnie the Pooh there's Kanga. And I saw this really great description of resilience a while back. And it's Kanga, and it says, it's not how high I can jump, it's how often I can keep jumping. And that to me is resilience. It's how often I can keep jumping. So if we look on page 12, there's a lovely diagram there around the things I can control, the things I can't control. Now, we're going to talk in a moment about reframing thinking. And reframing thinking is really affected by the past and the future. You know, we are the products of our upbringing. We are the products of our life experience. In many ways, we're the products of our family and the way we have been brought up and the environment that we've been brought up. And so the question you probably are going through in your mind, is that a good thing or a bad thing? And the answer is probably yes to both. There's many things that come out of that that are really wonderful and great and should be treasured. But there's also stuff that comes out of that, which has possibly been reinforced by life experiences that you do need to change. So again, we are entering on a journey of challenging ourselves to be the best that we choose to be, not the best that I think you could be, the best you choose to be. So examine those things. We come to that in a moment. The things that you can control are my actions and my thoughts. Now, anybody who has woken up at 3 a.m. worrying about something will know that, you know, on a scale of 1 to 10, with this over here being 10, this is happiness and nirvana, and this over here being Fukushima on a really bad day, often at 3 a.m. it sits down this really negative end. And again, one of the tools that you use there is to break that pattern. Get up and have a drink, have a cup of tea, or have something. Don't sit on your computer. Don't sit on your iPhone or your iPad or anything like that. But get up and maybe sit at a journal and write it down, what it is that you've been bothering you, and then let it go and go back to bed. And then you'll probably sleep. So after a while, you're training your mind to know that you're not going to sit there and go over and over with it. You're training your mind to actually deal with it. And psychologically, humans change their ways of dealing with things, especially their thinking, when they write things down. So writing things down is really, really important. Again, you see that things you can't control the actions of others. We've talked about that. The opinions of others. Again, you need to look at the person, where they're coming from, and how valid is their opinion. We live in a world of opinions. Social media, news media, all sorts of things are full of people's opinions. And many of them are described as facts. They're not. They're just their opinions. And so one of the key things, if you look around, I can't control what happens around me, what other people think of me, the outcome of my efforts, how others take care of themselves. And sometimes we feel really responsible for other people. And we were having this conversation with my team this morning. And one of our values is, I commit to acting with love, respect, and kindness. And we were asking, the debate was going on, does this apply to everybody? And the answer was, it applies to people who wish to help themselves. So people who don't wish to help themselves, you can't do much about. So you can't take care of others who don't want to be taken care of. So again, it's you building your own practice that fits your lifestyle, fit yourself, and adapt it around that. The self-analysis that's very important is this piece in the middle of this diagram, what I can control. And this is where your resilience and wellness practice sits. And this requires self-examination, and it requires you to start taking actions, I call them micro actions, that will create habits, which will create behaviors, which will change how you see things. As I said earlier, ever since I was knee-high to a grasshopper, I've been asking myself, no matter what situation I'm in, where does the opportunity sit? And that just pulls my attention, my focus, my locus of focus away from where it was to something that is a possibility. That's just training yourself into that habit. So look at your thoughts and actions. Look at where I give my energy to. Write them down. Do some thinking about this. Or if you have a really valued, trusted partner or family member that you can have really good, open conversations with no judgment, talk about it to them. A really important one there is how I speak to myself. Now, lots of people have got this negative self-talk, oh, I can't do that. Oh, no, I wouldn't be able to do that. And it's funny, when we do coaching with a lot of people, you'd be surprised how many people have this negative self-talk. So change how you see yourself. Change how you talk to yourself. Like, you're a really unique, remarkable human being. And you have a whole group of unique and remarkable abilities and skills. And you know what is funny? Is that many times I've had people with really, really negative self-talk. And I've got them to gather around a group of friends or colleagues and get them to do a brainstorm around how they see that person. In every situation, the person comes out absolutely mind-blowing, because what comes up in this brainstorm of how other people see that person is completely different to the self-talk that they're giving to themselves. Now, we do a really interesting little exercise. I do it probably every 8 months. So I'm writing stuff I know, but I do it every 8 months because it's a really good sort of circuit breaker. Write down all the things since the age of 5 that you are really proud of having done. Write down the things that people told you couldn't do, but you did. Write down the crazy things that you have done that you did because you're just crazy and you love doing them. Write these things down and you look at them and you go, wow. You'll be surprised at what you end up writing down, because that is really tapping into you and how remarkable you are. So some of the work you need to do is around this diagram here, around what I can control. I suggest you look at it. I'm going to build a resilience and wellness practice, or you could just call it my Kikaha practice, my stay strong practice. And then start building, not on big stuff, Just start doing the micro actions, and we'll give you some tools in the next seminars. But just start working on some of these things. What do I give my energy to? Do I give it to worrying? Do I give it to other people? Or do I give it to myself? And why do I do that? Go back and examine why you do that. We'll talk about that in a minute. How do I handle challenges? Do I look at the negative side of them, or do I look at the positive side of them? So let's look over on page 13, where we have stressors. So we call them stressors for a very good reason, because the moment you use the word stress, people go, it's bad. Well, some stress is bad and some stress is good. And there's a balance. So like, for example, bad stress is, if you look down that right-hand side, it's long lasting, it's chronic, it doesn't change, it's always there. And that generally, if you go back to page 12 and look at some of the thinking patterns you have got, or some of the people you surround yourself with, or some of the situations you put yourself in, they will be coming and they will be generating this long-lasting chronic stress. Now, bad stress demotivates you. It also affects your health. It breaks down self-esteem and has a negative impact on your life. Now, what is the positive stress? Positive stress, like I always think of the greatest positive stress is Christmas for kids. You know, kids get really stressed out about Christmas, and I don't know whether parents still say it, but probably still do. You know, you got to be good because Santa's coming at Christmas. But, you know, kids are excited about Christmas and they're stressed about it, but it's a positive stress. It's like if you're going on a holiday, you know, you may be stressed about getting the packing right and getting all your documentation and tickets right and the booking right and whether the weather will be great or not. But it's good stress. It's not bad stress. So it can be short-lived, it can be infrequent, but it inspires you to act. It builds self-esteem and generally has a positive impact on your life. So it's imagining where it is. Now, one of the ones that I always thought was a positive stressor, but when I self-examined myself years ago, I realized it was probably a bad stressor, was whenever I had to do a report of any kind, I would sort of leave it to about 48 or 24 hours before I had to do the report, because I had this theory in my head, the stress of the deadline helps my creativity. And then for 2 days, let's say I would be really stressed out about doing this. And it took me once when I was doing some self-reflection to work out I was deluding myself around that this was good stress because it was really bad stress. And I could still achieve the same result if I did it a different way and planned it differently. And so very rarely would you find me at the last moment now ever doing any kind of report against the deadline. I would normally have it done before the deadline. I don't get stressed to the same degree about it. But it was actually me working out what was good stress and bad stress. So for you, you need to work through in your life, do a list. Just do a list in those two columns, good stress and bad stress, and say, well, which one are they? And maybe some of what you think is good stress is it being like Terry. It's like, maybe it's not. It needs to go to this other column. So what is the secret? The secret is on page 14 and 15. Now, I can't overemphasize the importance of these because they drive our lives and they drive success and they drive health and they drive everything really in our lives. So the power of beliefs. On page 14, we say we often repeat the patterns of the past. And if we were sitting in the same room, I'd be saying to you, now, where does your patterns come from? Where do your beliefs come from? Like, you know, people have said to me, oh, but I am my beliefs. And I go, no, you're not. You know, people used to believe the world was flat. Now we know it's round. Unless, of course, you are a flat earther, in which case you will still believe it is flat, but there's not many of those. Our values probably don't change much, but our beliefs will. Our beliefs around what happens around us or who we are or how we do things change. But humans, though, don't like changing, do they? We say we like changing, but often humans don't. And our core beliefs, as you'll see, they're number one, create our reality. And then we take those core beliefs and we filter them through. We take our actions and filter them through our core beliefs. And then we reflect them in language and behaviors. And you'll see that in many situations. You'll see it in many walks of life, religion, politics, all sorts of life. You'll see people go, yes, but, because my core belief says this and I actually believe that. And it's not necessarily correct. And it may not be correct for you, it may be correct for them. Most of these beliefs come from, guess where? They come from our upbringing. They come from our childhood. And then we adjust them and change them through our culture, through things like religion, workplaces, the things that happen to us, the experiences that we happen to us. And there was that wise saying, a well-examined life is a good life, but often we don't examine it to that degree. We go along and do stuff because we've always done it. And they sit there very strongly. So, like, I was brought up in a very Irish Catholic family, right? In Ashburton. So for those of you who don't know where Ashburton is, it's known as Ash Vegas, and it sits about an hour south of Christchurch. And then you head up into the hills to Methven, and that's where I come from. So farming stock, Irish Catholic upbringing. So our family had very sort of immigrant mentality. Mum was always saying you need to study hard and be successful. So that was there. We had the sort of the religious aspect overlaying our upbringing, and then we're in the country. So you had to turn your hand to do jobs. You're expected to work hard, even as a kid. All of those sort of things. Now, if you sort of said to me, am I the product of that now? There's many of those threads still run through my life. Many of those threads still run through my life. What I've got to be careful about is that the negative threads I have been able to remove or to compensate for those negative threads. And, there's many of them. So we are the product of our upbringing. If we don't think about it, we just keep putting everything that happens in our life through that filter. And that means we keep doing the same old, and hoping to get different outcomes because the world around us has changed. Man, it doesn't work like that. We have to actually examine ourselves, challenge ourselves, and say, is what I am going to do or think relevant to the situation I'm in? That's where, when I look at a situation and go, where does the opportunity sit? I'm pushing a new framework. I'm going, well, it certainly doesn't sit where I would generally go to. It may sit over here, or I may not know, and I need to find ways to do it. So challenging our thinking and adjusting our belief system to the situation that around us will help build your resilience. It will help build your wellness. The second part of it that's really important is on page 15. And page 15 talks about how our brain works. Now, an interesting factoid is that probably we know as much about the surface of the planet Mars as we do about the workings of the brain. And I could talk here for probably an hour on the shifts and changes that medical science is being able to develop, understand around how the brain works. But let's put it into its very most simplistic form. We have two parts of our brain on page 15. A neocortex. Now, a neocortex is our logical part of our brain. And I'm generalizing here now, so forgive me. So if there's any person out there who has a medical degree in brain, then you're probably going to go, he's sort of right, but he's not. But let's generalize. So our neocortex part of our brain is our logical part of our brain. It is where we deal with facts and figures, and we deal with those things that are reality driven. Our limbic system is our older brain. It is that fear and flight brain, or as some people like to call it, a reptilian brain. But it's the brain that is driven by emotions. It is driven by our fear and flight. It's a brain that taps into, guess what it taps into? It taps into our beliefs. And it goes way back. So if you were back in the cave days, right? And you knew that tigers would eat you for lunch if they could catch you, and somebody comes running down the path and said, there's a tiger coming, you didn't do the neocortex stuff of using logic going, is that bushy-tailed tiger or the one with the curly tail? You didn't. You just turned around and ran because tigers eat you. That was your belief system. And so that is a part of the brain that humans have. Now, what is the interesting thing around this? The most interesting thing around this limbic system is we generally see things in pictures. We generally see things in pictures. And I've used the example many times, is that if you describe something factually to a person, they probably wouldn't buy it. And it was I've been watching a video series by a guy called Rory Sutherland, and he's talking about why people buy things. They don't buy them because they're logical and sensible. They generally, some things they may, right? But most times we buy stuff because it appeals to an emotive aspect of what we want in our life. So, food, we'll buy food, and that's probably using neocortex. But if we were buying something different, we would be buying it using a limbic system. So, there was a case study done many years ago in the States around cars. And the selling point of the car was the size of the motor, how fast it would go, all that good stuff. But when they did the research, they found out that it generally wasn't the male who made the decision on buying the car. It was generally the male's partner, would make that decision. They made it around color, seats, and safety, those kind of things. It's all emotive stuff. So what's the point of this? The point is when we set a goal, for example, if we haven't got a picture of what success looks like, we will struggle to achieve it. So let's imagine I said to you, your goal is to lose 5 kilos. And you go, okay. Now, if I said to you, your goal is to lose 5 kilos because you can buy this piece of clothing for this wedding or whatever it may be, you've now got a picture of you in that clothing and going, okay, I'm gonna try that. So that's a very simplistic example. Why is it important around resilience? It is because where we tend to go when we get stressed, we go to our limbic system and we create a picture. Any of you who have woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning thinking about something, you're probably thinking with your limbic system, and you're probably getting that picture bigger and bigger and bigger, or catastrophization. Hence why I suggest you break it and go and write in a journal. So the interesting thing around our limbic system is it drives resilience. And how we manage the pictures in our lives relating to our beliefs is really essential to both building resilience and wellness. So how does this work? What I would tend to do, you need to be able to sit down, look at page 12, write down on a piece of paper and go, right, what can I control that's happening in my life? What can I control? And then you start going down and saying, what of those are coming from my ingrained belief system, the ways I always do things? And generally, you will do them without thinking about them. Generally, you will do them without thinking about them. So like, as you can see, I shave every morning. Now, I could almost guarantee you I will shave exactly the same way every day. I don't think about it. It's just something that is default. It's an ingrained belief that I do it this way. And if I tried to do it a different way, I would probably struggle. But if I could sit down and work out by doing it a different way would give me a far better result, and I could see the picture of what that change would mean to me, then why wouldn't I change? I would. Now, the other thing as we go back to what we started talking about today, you can't change big stuff easy. So start with little stuff. So that's why I keep talking about build yourself a resilience practice. Build it and work at it. It's no different than going to the gym to build yourself a muscle or fitness practice. This is a resilience and wellness practice. So go over to page 16 and have a look at that, because some of the thinking styles and reframing that we all use, every single one of us uses them probably. Black and white thinking, you'll often hear people go, nah, that's good or it's bad, you know, and maybe, maybe not. Overgeneralization. Everybody hates me. You possibly have heard that. That's probably not true, you know, but people overgeneralize, which can cause, like, pictures. If you go back to that limbic picture, if you took both of those, it's either good or bad, or everybody or everything, then we're creating pictures in our minds that are not positive. They're not good for resilience. Personalizing it. He or she did not like me. You don't know. Could have just been the way they were. And we filter out negative beliefs, or we filter out positive beliefs, depending on what our belief system has been and the experiences we've had in life. Mind reading is a good one. People go, but so-and-so's thinking this, or, but if I did that, I would fail, or whatever it may be. Labeling, there's another bad one, because by labeling, you're putting labels on things, you're creating pictures. Like if you said, oh, such and such is stupid, well, probably they're not, but by creating that picture, or actually saying, I've been really stupid. Often in self-talk, you get this labeling, oh, I'm such an idiot, I keep getting it wrong, or whatever. That's negative self-talk. Labeling, change it. The one at 3 in the morning, predicting catastrophization. And there's a logical reason why you need to break it at 3 in the morning. If you imagine a computer with no virus filter, that's us at 3 in the morning. Our biorhythms at their very lowest ebb. And so if you took how a person feels at 3 in the morning about a certain subject, and you could shift them to 8 in the morning when the sun has come up on the same subject, feeling the same way and thinking the same things, they'd be a lot more positive. It's a biorhythm thing. So be very, very careful about catastrophization or catastrophe. Comparing is a very challenging one if you want to build resilience, because you'll always be dissatisfied. People that I have seen in my life that I've coached, they keep comparing themselves to others or whatever. Don't. Be happy with what you have. Feel blessed with what you have. Avoidance. Now, I got a friend of mine, and I said to him one day, why is it that you don't want to deal with problems? And he said, I carry a box of sand with me all the time, and whenever I come across something I don't like, I put the box down and put my head in it. And I said, how's that working for you? He said, it's not really. And it doesn't. I mean, he's always going from one crisis to another crisis. Why? Because he's avoiding dealing with some behaviors or things in his life. And this is often the case when we talked earlier about the people that surround you. Now, rationalization is good if you're shopping, right? You can go, I really need this thing. It's a bit expensive, but I really, really need it. It's going to be really useful. That's rationalization. So that's okay. But rationalizing other parts of your life is probably not so good. You can't rationalize different behaviors. You can't rationalize bad thinking. So challenge yourself around these. So remember one thing that you do keep control of on page 17. You can reframe and control your thoughts. And go back to what I started talking about here today was the big important things in the world today. One of them is reframing. One of them is adapting. And one of them is learning or being curious. So by building your practice and putting it into that context, I'm building my resilience and wellness practice, put it into that context, and then start examining what happens in your world. I need to understand what I do, why I do it. I need to catch myself and notice it, that I am doing that, especially self-talk or how I talk to others. Challenge your thoughts. You go down and think, oh, okay, I don't think I can do that stuff. That's why I said earlier today, write down a list of all the things since 5 that you've done, you're really proud of. Things that even people said, you can't do that, and you went and did it. And I did mine recently over Christmas, New Year, and I'm sitting there, even myself, going, Wow. Yeah, I remember when people said to me, Terry, you're nuts. You can't do that. And I went out and did it anyway. So it's around challenging those thoughts and replace them, especially with self-talk, with positive thoughts. Replace a negative thought for 30 days with positive thoughts, and you'll have a new habit. And a new habit will create new behaviors, which will enable you to create different goals. I was talking to a client recently, and I went into that organization 7 years ago. And this was a really, really negative team. And we put them on 30-day challenges. So, sorry, not 30 days, 90-day challenges. So every 90 days, they had a goal which they worked towards achieving, and they achieved it, and then they'd celebrate. You walk into that group today, and the room literally vibrates with positivity, because for 7 years, 4 times a year, they've been hitting goals and succeeding. So now their thinking is, we can do anything. We can do anything. So what's happened by doing that stuff, they've created new behaviors, which have created new thoughts, which is the goal that they set out to get in the first place. And practice reframing your thoughts. Write down some of the things that you think are really concrete in your life, or thoughts that are fundamental to you, and challenge them. Write them down and challenge them. I love the quote at the bottom there by Viktor Frankl: between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and freedom. And Viktor Frankl wrote a book, if some of you may have read it. He was a survivor of the concentration camps in Germany in the Second World War. And every day in his mind, he was a psychologist in Austria, in Vienna, before the war. And he was captured and put in the concentration camp. And every day in his mind, he wrote a presentation he would give when he got out of the camps. And he said in his book, he got to a point where he couldn't die because he had too many presentations to give when he got out. And so that was him making his choice in his way. So I think that it's a wonderful book to read, but I think the essence that we've got here between what happens and how we respond to it is a space. And in that space, we choose how we respond. So don't let situations around you dictate how you respond. Make it something that you choose to do so. So the last thing I'd like to talk about here today is on page 18 and 19. And this is how you manage change. And this can apply to yourself personally, and it can apply to yourself as a manager and a leader. Often when we talk about change, they use the Kubler-Ross model, which is that grief cycle. I don't like it. It's fine if granny dies or your pet dies, but it's a grief cycle. It is not a change cycle. And I think the moment you equate change to grief, you are actually going into some of that negative thinking. Some change is grieving, there's no doubt about that, but most change is really positive that happens in our lives. So shift your thinking around this framework. I like this framework. The most important step in this framework, and if we were all sitting together, I'd ask you for a chocolate fish, I would say, which one do you think is important? 1, 2, or 3? But since we're not here and I can't give you a chocolate fish, I'll let you know that 3 is the most important, not 1. Why is 3 important? Let's go back to our limbic system, creating the picture. Now, almost everybody you meet today tells you that they're a leader in an organization or some sort. They're not. Often most people are managers who think they're leaders, but they're not leaders. Leaders are very good at creating 3s. They create a picture of what success looks like. The one that I love is that Martin Luther King didn't stand up at the Washington Memorial and go, I have a really interesting plan that we would implement in 3 weeks' time. He didn't. He said, I have a dream. And then he talked about that dream of educating kids. It's like John F. Kennedy, who was the American president, and after America had been beaten into space by Russia, he made this great speech. And he said, we will be on the moon in 10 years' time, not because it's easy, but because it is hard. Now, you could say, yep, that's hyperbole. Probably is. but it tapped into people at that time. That picture resonated with people. So creating a picture of what success looks like is the most powerful way of actually beginning to create it. Then you come back and you look at where you are now. Then you look at what you need to do to get from 1 to 3. So if you're managing teams, and I could talk quite a bit about this, but we'll keep it brief. If anybody wants to send me a message, and I'm very happy to talk to them about it with teams, it is actually getting the team to buy into the picture of what 3 looks like, what the new order, what the new place, what the new situation will look like. And once people buy into that, they'll buy into it at a limbic level. They won't buy into it at a neocortex level. So if you're actually sending out an email to people and saying, this is a wonderful thing, we're going to save 10%, blah, 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 people won't buy into it because that's just neocortex stuff. But if you can actually show them why it's important to them, creating that limbic picture for them, people will come with you and they will change. And if we look back in history, the likes of Mandela, Churchill, whoever it may be, they created great pictures that people bought into. So I think that that's a really important step for us to understand the importance of creating pictures, the importance of understanding what it is those pictures represent to us in terms of our lives. And once we're very clear about those pictures, we build our resilience practice around how we move from 1 to 3, which is that. And the way to do that is to put it into the context of a resilience practice. Just like if you were in a sporting team and you were wanting to get better at what you would do, you would have a practice to get better. Same thing with resilience and wellness. There's no magic wand, but you work it out. And as you start going down that track, it becomes pretty exciting because all of a sudden you start finding things happening in your life that wouldn't have happened before. And in our next session, we're going to talk about some of those, particularly around energy and some of the tools that you can use. But I'll make one promise to you, and that is if you follow what we're talking about in these seminars, you will change your life. And I've seen it happen many, many times. So if you've got any questions, please put them in the chat or email Jenny with them. But that wraps us up for today, and I'll look forward to catching up with you next week when we can begin to start talking about energy and the importance of energy in terms of resilience and wellness. So thanks very much. Go well, keep safe, and start on the journey of building your resilience and wellness practice today. It's a micro action that will create a habit, which will create a behavior, and it will change your life. Thank you very much.